We're making observations. We're paying attention to the details. We're looking at patterns in feathers or flowers. We're looking at colors. We're looking at shapes. We're taking into account the ecosystem, the habitat. We look at behavior, connecting people with nature. And that's our mission here at the Montana Natural History Center, is to connect people with nature.
Welcome to the Trail Less Traveled, an adventure radio series and podcast dedicated to collecting stories and sounds from around the world in order to take you back to mankind's earliest form of entertainment, storytelling. Missoula, Montana is a mecca for outdoor enthusiasts, and each week we will bring you tales of adventure from both near and far, as well as information and inspiration and a few tunes to set the mood. You can subscribe to the podcast and learn about our international outreach projects at traillesstraveled.net. And now, here's your host, International Expedition Guide, Conservationist, and Yogi, Mandela.
We're sitting at the Montana Natural History Center here in Missoula, Montana. And I'm sitting here with Kelly Dix. She is a Master Naturalist volunteer and board member for the Montana Natural History Center. She was raised in New York, where she spent time outside, and it sparked her curiosity and awe of the natural world. She holds degrees in mathematics, environmental sciences and engineering, and toxicology. Throughout her career in biomedical research, she spent her spare time backpacking and exploring the Mountain West with her husband. Kelly found her true passion in retirement, sharing her enthusiasm for science and nature with others. She's been a substitute teacher and a volunteer with several environmental education nonprofit organizations. After moving to Montana with her husband in 2016, Kelly found her home at the Montana Natural History Center, and she has been involved with many programs, including Montana Master Naturalist. When she's not volunteering, you can find her at the Missoula Butterfly House and Insectarium. Thank you so much for your time and energy joining me here today on the Trail Less Traveled.
Thank you for having me.
I was wondering if we could begin by talking about your early childhood. So my first question for you is, where did you grow up, and how was the natural world a part of your childhood?
I grew up in a small town called Lyndonville, New York. It's in a very rural area of upstate New York, between Buffalo and Rochester, about 45 miles from Niagara Falls. It was, as I said, a small town and maybe 1,000 people. I have three siblings, two brothers and a sister, and we spent a lot of time outside growing up. Outside playing any time of year. I have vivid memories, actually, of climbing into a pussy willow tree with a book and reading in the summertime. I think the natural world for me was opened at a very, very early age. My grandparents lived out in the country in the house that my father grew up in, and they had bird feeders. We were always looking at the birds, and my grandparents would tell me, well, that's the little yellow bird, which turned out to be an American goldfinch. Hummingbirds were around. Just the fact that there was this homestead that my dad grew up on out in the country on a farm where people are close to the earth. I grew up in town, but in our backyard, or just behind our backyard, was some wild spaces. We had access to a creek and woods and meadows full of wildflowers and blackberries and apple orchards. And when I wasn't outside playing with my siblings and all of the neighbor kids, and we had a lot of neighbor kids, I would be just exploring. Playing sports with my siblings, out there shooting baskets or catching baseballs or kicking the soccer ball around. It was a lot of fun. We were outside a lot. Even, growing up in a northern latitude where it stays late, like in Missoula, it stays light very late at night. So we would be outside after dark in the summertime, which was pretty late, playing hide and seek games and finding little spaces to hide in the bushes or up in a tree or someplace where you thought you could get away with being unseen. I think some of the memories that I have from my youth was, my grandparents were definitely a huge influence on me. My parents, for sure. My dad worked on a thoroughbred horse farm when I was very young, so I would go to the farm with him in the summertime and just sit on the tractor with him while he baled hay and go groom the horses or be chased around the farm by the rooster, which was always interesting. You never knew what corner that rooster was going to come from. My mom, she wasn't as much of an outdoors person, but she always encouraged us to be outside. She appreciated the flowers. She had a rose garden. It was just beautiful. There were so many different varieties of roses, and I remember my great-grandfather actually just being in love with the rose garden there, and rock garden that went along with it, with hens and chickens and just all kinds of different fragrances and textures and colors that the natural world offered to me was just fascinating. At the time, I wasn't really super into insects or creepy crawly things. My brothers used to chase me around the yard with worms, so I never really got into worms and fishing because of that. But flowers and birds always fascinated me. It wasn't until I got a little bit older that I appreciated that everything is connected and that we can't have one without the other. We can't have flowers without the insects and the birds, all of the pollinators. One thing I remember about growing up, this time of year, autumn, was one of my favorite times of year. The change in the leaves. I grew up on a street called Maple Avenue. It was lined with sugar maples, and just the colors that came out in the trees and how the aromas changed as the seasons changed. And walking to school and hearing that crunch, crunch, crunch of the leaves that had fallen. Right next door to us, there was an open field. It was grass. It was a place for us to play. It was owned by our next door neighbors, but we used it as a playground, basically. And I remember in the fall, kids in the neighborhood, we had this big tarp, and we would go to the houses on our street where the elderly women lived, and we would rake up all the leaves onto this tarp and drag them over to this open field. So we had this huge pile of leaves that we could just jump in and play in, and it was just fascinating to me that you could get so much cooperation with all of these kids playing together outside, enjoying nature, but not really thinking of it that way. It's like we were just having fun. It wasn't like we were doing it to be out in nature. It was just there. It was a part of us. So some of the other things that were really had a big influence on me as a kid, the school was the hub of the town. Everything revolved around the school. We had obviously academics, but sports, music was a big part of our lives, and student government. I had the opportunity to have some pretty amazing teachers as a kid, especially science teachers and math teachers, some great coaches that I learned a lot of life lessons through the time that I spent at school. Some of it was through the academic part, but I think a lot of it revolved around sports, where I learned the importance of being a part of a team and how that shaped me for the rest of my life, because every work environment that I was in, I was going to have to be a part of a team. It also helped me to understand how important communication and trust and the fact that everybody has something to contribute to the conversation. Everybody has a strength that they can bring to the table. And I think that was one reason I ended up in the field that I ended up in. Toxicology is very much an interdisciplinary science, and the more perspectives that you can bring to the table, the stronger the team is. So I was working with chemists and pathologists and aerosol scientists and statisticians, and just everybody had a different perspective coming together to work on a problem and bring these different perspectives to solutions. I think another thing that had an influence on me was student government. Again, it was a situation or an opportunity to learn how to bring people together, people who didn't always have the same opinions, that we can work together, that we have to listen to each other. We need to hear everybody's opinion. We may not agree on everything, but we can work together and respect each other and come up with some really amazing things. Again, it's part of being a team where you have different ideas that other people might not have thought about, maybe open their eyes a little bit. And I think that that's something that to this day is a very important part of who I am. So I'm just listening to what people are saying and trying to get people to listen to each other instead of pushing back and holding firm in their beliefs and not accepting conversation.
That's the voice of Kelly Dix. We're here at the Montana Natural History Center, and I wanted to talk to you about the connection between what you just said about learning to truly listen and the natural world. What does it mean to listen to the natural world?
There's so much going on in the natural world. There's song, there's a lot of background noise that we normally would focus on the background noise, but if you just stop and sit in one place and listen to the chorus that's going on around you, the insect sounds, the bird song, movement of critters through the leaves. I mean, one thing that I like to tell kids when I'm out on field trips with them is we talk about how we make observations, and their immediate response is, well, we look at something. And I said, yeah, that's really important, but how many times have you been outside in your backyard or at the playground and you hear something rustling in the leaves? A lot of times we hear things before we see them, and if we open our ears and hear all of the different voices, the different sounds, that directs our attention to investigate a little bit further. Things that we may not have looked for, but they're there. There are so many hidden things there, and their voices are there. We hear them. If we take the time, if we slow down enough to just listen.
I'd like to talk to you now, Kelly, a little bit about your background in mathematics, sciences and engineering, and toxicology.
So when I was in high school, I was fortunate to have some really good teachers, math and science teachers. I found that those were my strengths. Math and science were my strengths, and decided to pursue an education. I got my bachelor's in mathematics from the University of Rochester, which wasn't too far away, but it was far enough away that I met people from all over the world. I was involved as an undergraduate with the work-study program, so part of my time was spent working in toxicology labs in the medical school at the University of Rochester. And through that, as well as classes that I took on campus and some of the teaching assistants that I met on campus and intramural sports that I did on campus, I met a lot of international students and people that were from different parts of the country that had different accents than me. First of all, I really had to listen. To hear the different accents really, again, opened my world, just listening to other people and how they say things. I met a lot of interesting people at the University of Rochester Medical Center, and as I said, I worked in a toxicology lab, and that got me really interested in the chemistry aspect of toxicology. While I was working at the medical center, I decided to minor in chemistry, not just focus on math. So after 1 year of college, decided to take all of this chemistry and a little bit of physics to catch me up. The life sciences always eluded me. I really was focused on the chemistry and the math because it was black and white. It was very clear. There were rules. There were pretty direct answers if you knew what the rules were. And the life sciences threw in a monkey wrench for me. There's so much that we didn't know. But I decided to go to graduate school. I started in a PhD program actually in operations research and systems analysis, which is applied mathematics. And after a couple of weeks of advanced statistics classes, I decided that that really wasn't what I was after. Luckily, I was at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and they had an incredible School of Public Health. And all of the math classes that I took applied to a transfer to the School of Public Health, where, I started a PhD program in environmental sciences and engineering, focusing chemistry and math. And after a year or so of that, I decided, the School of Public Health is great. I've learned a lot here, but I think I want to focus more environmental toxicology than biomedical and human health related toxicology. So after I finished my master's, I decided to go to North Carolina State University in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is like a rival school of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So a lot of my friends in Chapel Hill weren't super crazy about me switching allegiances. But I felt like it, again, opened doors for me. I was able to do research for my PhD program that looked at things that people are exposed to in the environment, whether they're natural products that we are exposed to or things that are byproducts of drinking water disinfection or chemicals that we humans have put into the environment, and look at not the biological side. A lot of people think of toxicology as looking at what happens to the body when you're exposed to something. I was kind of the flip side of that. I studied more what happens to the chemical once it gets into your body. How does it get into your body? Is it absorbed through the skin? If you swallow it, is it absorbed into your bloodstream? Once it gets into your bloodstream, how does it move around? How is it changed? How is it metabolized? Is it metabolized to something that is more toxic or less toxic? And how do we get rid of it? So it was using mathematical models and chemistry to understand how chemicals move in the body and indirectly, I guess, how they affect the body. It was fascinating to me. That's called pharmacokinetics, where we're looking at the movement of chemicals and describing it mathematically about how things move around. Again, I had the opportunity to work on my PhD at the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, which is in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. That opened a lot of doors for me. I met people through international conferences. Toxicology is an incredibly diverse field. I shared an office with someone who we were in the same program. We shared an office, we had the same advisor, but we spoke different languages by the time we graduated because we had different focuses. Toxicology for some people means CSI, right? We're looking at crime scenes and looking at forensic toxicology. Toxicology for some people is, oh, you're looking at poisons. Oh, that's really cool. And for other people, they're looking at the molecular level, what's happening at the molecular level. And we all have very different languages. Again, I mentioned earlier that toxicology is the field where people from different backgrounds come together to solve problems, where you have what we always call gene jockeys, the molecular biology people who are looking at what happens to the DNA. We're talking to chemists who are trying to understand how things are absorbed. We're talking to statisticians, like, okay, this is happening, what does it mean? Working with pathologists to say, we have an exposure, someone's exposed to this compound, we take a blood sample from them, we see these changes in parameters that you normally would get measured in your blood just with routine blood work. But what does that mean? So the multidisciplinary approach to science, you've got people with different backgrounds. You have to listen to each other. You can't force your opinion. I mean, you can state your opinion, but you have to be open-minded and listen to other possibilities that are outside of your area of expertise in order to understand the big picture. From there, I'm now in North Carolina, graduate student, and getting involved with people who were very interested in being outside. That's where I started getting involved with things like the local Audubon Society and participating in field trips with them and starting to backpack. Where I grew up in New York State, there wasn't a lot of public land. North Carolina has more public land. We would go Research Triangle Park, the Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill area is kind of in the center of the state, and at the time I lived there, you could drive 3 or 4 hours and get into the mountains and do some pretty amazing backpacking. And then when I moved to New Mexico, from there I realized, wow, I'm living in New Mexico in Albuquerque, which is at 5,000 feet, which is, almost as high as the highest peaks on the East Coast. Very different environment, very different ecosystems for sure. I mean, I went from North Carolina, where it's hot and humid, there's a lot of precipitation, there's a lot of green, Sometimes you can't find your way because there are too many trees to see the landmarks. And from there I moved to the desert, where the trees are smaller. It's very dry compared to the East Coast, and you can see forever, which is great, but it's also, as someone who spends a lot of time outside, I used to run a lot, and when you're running and you see this mountain in the distance and you've been running for half an hour and that mountain isn't getting any closer, that's a little bit intimidating to see just how grand the landscape was there. The change in the scenery in New Mexico, the plants that I got to learn, the birds, different sides of the country, and seeing even more now than in North Carolina, how much public land there is out west. If you look at a map, and I did this recently, I went to the USGS website and saw a map of public lands in the United States. And it's incredible to see that on, the eastern half, east of the Rocky Mountains, there's not a lot of public lands. And if you look at the top 10 states in terms of federal public lands, they're all out west, including Alaska. And those public lands still give us here in Montana so many opportunities to get outside and really dive into the natural world that I don't feel like are available to as many people the East Coast or in the Midwest, because those public lands aren't there. And these public lands are so important to hunters and anglers and hikers. Everybody depends on these public lands, and they're a huge part of the economy as well. And we need to, in my opinion, we need to preserve those spaces for generations to come. And I think there's what they call a generational amnesia, where what is normal for me now, going out into the public lands and seeing what we have now, that's normal. But if I look back 50 years ago, it was a very different landscape then. There were more public lands. There were fewer people utilizing those public lands. The people who are here 50 years from now may see a very different landscape in terms of the public lands and what they look like and what they're able to do on those public lands. And we need to protect those spaces. Those are the spaces that, again, science actually shows that when you are out in nature, your physiology changes. You relax. For me, being out in the natural world, in these wild spaces, especially when I'm alone or with a very small group of people, that's when I breathe. I really breathe and breathe easily. That's where I find peace. I can forget about everything that's going on in the world and just be in the moment and take in the sounds and the aromas and the textures and, oh my gosh, how many colors of green are there? And, oh wow, I recognize that bird, but I'm not sure exactly what it is. It sounds a little bit different than I think it should, and it turns out it's a species that's similarly or closely related, but not exactly the bird that I thought it was. There's just so much to explore. And I feel incredibly fortunate to be living in Missoula, Montana. I actually live in Lolo, which is south of Missoula, but to have access to the Bitterroot Mountains. 15 minutes from my house, I can be at a trailhead and get into these wild places that they're just my sanctuary.
Kelly, let's dive in. I'd like to first talk about where we are sitting today, and then, jumping into the Master Naturalist program in schools and some of the other activities that you're a part of.
Okay. We are here at the Montana Natural History Center, 120 Hickory Street in Missoula, Montana. This is my second home. The organization has existed since the early 90s. And it's an organization that is focused on connecting people with nature. And we do that through education. So the programs that are offered through the Montana Natural History Center are based to the extent possible on being outside and being a part of the natural world. The programs that I'm involved with that are near and dear to my heart, the first one that I got involved with was the Visiting Naturalist in the Schools program. I moved here from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and while I was there, after I retired, I got involved with the Sandia Mountain Natural History Center, which gave me an opportunity to get outside with kids. Take kids from Albuquerque, get them into the Sandia Mountains, which were right on the edge of Albuquerque, and spend a day in the field talking about ecology. And some of these kids have never been into the mountains before, and they didn't know what to expect. So I learned a lot about kids, first of all, and what their level of knowledge and understanding is of the natural world. When I moved here, the first thing I did was seek out the Montana Natural History Center. And here at the Montana Natural History Center, the Visiting Naturalist in the Schools program is as close as I could come to the ecology field program at the Sandia Mountain Natural History Center. We moved here in the spring, and I got involved during field trip season, which is amazing. So the Visiting Naturalist in the Schools, or VNS program, is just this incredible program where we send teaching naturalists from the Montana Natural History Center go into the classroom once a month throughout the school year. And we impact mostly 4th and 5th graders, and anywhere from 50 to 70 classrooms each month in the Bitterroot Valley, the Missoula Valley, the Mission Valley. And in 2023-24 school year, we impacted over 1,500 kids. So in September, we go into the classroom and just talk to them about what is a naturalist, what do naturalists do? And we tell them we're people who spend time outside. We make observations about the natural world. And we learn a little bit about documenting our observations in a naturalist journal. In October, instead of going into the classroom, we take them out into the field for an entire day. So they're outside learning about the natural world, getting more confident in being comfortable in the outdoors. And that's one thing that I noticed about kids in Montana versus kids in New Mexico. We are surrounded in Missoula by public lands. We are a city of people who are outdoors people. There's the university, there's the School of Forestry, there's the Forest Service and the BLM, and all of these people whose lives depend on being in the natural world. So the kids are exposed to these things at a much younger age than they are in a big city like Albuquerque. So the background knowledge that the kids have here is amazing. And a lot of them come at it from, oh yeah, I've been out hunting with my uncle or fishing with my dad. And so they have this already an affinity and a relationship with the natural world that we're trying to just open their senses, open their minds a little bit more. During the rest of the school year, we have lessons on mammals, mammal skulls, how animals retain body heat in the wintertime. We get winter here in Missoula, so the animals need to be able to survive that if they can't migrate or hibernate. We talk about flowers. What are the parts of flowers? And they get to dissect flowers. And we talk about birds, bird beaks, and what the bird beak shape might mean about what the animal eats and how that animal survives. We talk about bird feathers and show them bird feathers and ask them, tell us about this feather. And a lot of the times the kids want to jump right in and say, oh, that's from Steller's jay. What we want them to do is not necessarily say who it belongs to, but what do we notice about it? And those are the key phrases that we use throughout the VNS program and in many other programs here at the Montana Natural History Center are, what do you notice? What do you wonder about it? And what does it remind you of? And those things, as a young kid and as an adult learner, really help you really learn and remember things. In the spring, in the VNS program, the last time we meet with the kids, it's in the field. It's another all-day field trip. And as in the fall, there are 3 stations. So each group of kids is divided into 3 subgroups, and they rotate through 3 different stations and learn different things. They might learn about insects or arthropods, or they might learn about how to become an expert in a subject, where we give them information and they get to teach other kids what they have learned so they become experts. To see the change in the kids from the October field trip to the May field trip is just fascinating. First of all, they've had more time to gel as a group. In the early part of the school year, they're just getting to know each other. Maybe they haven't been in the same classes before, and they're with a new teacher, with different rules. And then to see them in May, not just the changes in their group dynamics, but the changes in their comfort level in being outside and being able to apply what they've learned all year long from their visiting naturalists and apply that in the field. One thing that I find as a volunteer with the VNS program is getting into the classroom and understanding what we're teaching them throughout the school year, so that when I'm in the field with them, especially in May, I can say, oh, look, here's a feather on the ground. What part of the bird did this feather come from? Is it a tail feather? Is it a flight feather? I know you know this because we talked about it. And to me, one of the most rewarding things is when one kid will say, oh, let me get my journal. And they go back and look at the notes that they took from the classroom visit to figure out how to understand what part of the bird that came from, and making those connections with what they've learned in the classroom and being able to apply that in the field. It's just so much fun to watch them develop and mature. The visiting naturalist in the schools program, some of the concepts that we use there directly relate to the Montana Master Naturalist program, which is a program for adults. And this program was launched, I think, in 2005 by Brian Williams. It started out as Becoming a Naturalist, and now it's a certification-based course, which is modeled after the Master Gardener program. We get adults together in several different formats. We offer the Master Naturalist class in the fall as a combination of online Zoom classes as well as pre-recorded classes and a field weekend together in the field here in Missoula. We offer it in the spring as an in-person class where we meet weekly for 12 or 13 weeks, which is the same duration as in the fall. And it's also offered in the summer as a week-long class. So it's a very different format. Each of those is a very different format. But we talk about things like the geology of this amazing place. And there is so much geology here in the Missoula Valley, the glacial Lake Missoula and the uplifts. And geology is one of my weakest areas, so I can't speak in too much detail about that. But we also have lessons where we talk about flowers like we do with the kids and get into more detail, not just what are the flower parts, but the whole course is based on looking at patterns. Every group of organisms, be they flowers or mammals or birds or insects, there are so many diverse species. But if we look at patterns in each of them, we can break them down into smaller groups. For flowers, we can break them down into families. For insects, we can get to the level of order. Sometimes we can get a little bit closer. For birds, oftentimes we can get to species. So we're using the same principles. We're making observations. We're paying attention to the details. We're looking at patterns in feathers or flowers. We're looking at colors. We're looking at shapes. We're taking into account the ecosystem, the habitat. We look at behavior and try to take all of that information and make educated guesses, in some cases, at what it might be. So we're not always going to learn the name of the species, and that's okay. That was really hard for me to accept at first because I wanted to know the name of everything. But there are some things that don't have common names, especially in the world of insects, because there are so many that we don't know yet. But just being able to put them into groups and families to make them easier to understand is a huge step in connecting people with nature. And that's our mission here at the Montana Natural History Center, is to connect people with nature. The Master Naturalist program is a service-based certification, and one of the requirements for the program to maintain your certification is to do 20 hours of volunteer service, which is amazing. It's a great opportunity to stay involved with nature and the environment. And as a retired person, for me, this is my community. You know, this is where I meet people with similar passions, connecting kids especially, but also adults. Oh my gosh, to see a child for the first time smell a ponderosa pine tree is just, when you see the look in their eyes and hear them say, oh my gosh, it smells like cake. Things like that are fascinating. But it's just as fascinating to see an adult who is smelling a ponderosa for the first time. And we have people in the Master Naturalist class who are taking the class because they just moved here and they want to learn about the environment here, or because they've been here for 30 or 40 years and have always been hiking, but they never really paid attention. They never really listened or paid attention to the colors and the shapes and the patterns around them, and giving them those tools. I'll tell you, the first naturalist type class I took from Chuck Jonkel over 30 years ago changed my world. My goal was to start here and get to this point in a certain amount of time. And now it's start here and see how far we get before we have to turn around and head back. It slowed me down. It made me stop and pay attention to these claw marks on the trees that might have been put there by a bear. Or, oh, look at this pile of scat. Or, oh man, do you see this really cool, beautiful flower? And if you look closer at the flower, maybe there's an insect inside of it. And maybe there's another insect there, or arthropod, who's there because it's going to prey on the insect that's coming in to pollinate. It's just fascinating. The connections, everything is connected. And we just need to open our eyes and our ears. Getting back to the surface part of this, we have over 600 certified Master Naturalists in Montana. In 2024, those people contributed over 7,000 hours of volunteerism in their communities. That means 7,000 hours of people who are taking kids outside, or advocating for wild spaces, or going to trailheads and teaching people about bear awareness. There are so many ways that these Master Naturalists get involved, volunteering at different organizations. And we have people from all over the country, and I think even from Canada, who have taken the Montana Master Naturalist class because they want to learn more. They spend time in Montana and they want to learn more about it, or they just want to learn. They just want to learn and stay connected with their environment. So it's very rewarding to be a part of it. I started with this program in 2019, and I haven't stopped. And I think they're going to have to drag me away kicking and screaming to get me to separate myself from that program. It's so rewarding to be a part of getting adults to connect with nature at another level.
That's the voice of Kelly Dix. She is a Master Naturalist, volunteer, and board member here at the Montana Natural History Center. Kelly, if someone listening out there is inspired and they'd like to financially support the Montana Natural History Center and these programs, or get involved themselves in one of the many events and classes that are offered here, how do they find out more?
You can find out more by going to our website, which is montananaturalist.org. You can stop by the Natural History Center at 120 Hickory Street. You can call our front desk. There are opportunities to get involved as a volunteer in many different ways. Participate in our programs. There are programs that are offered throughout the year for people of all ages, from mini naturalists that are preschoolers all the way up to retired people like myself. And you can contribute in the same way. You can go to our website and make a donation to the Montana Natural History Center. You can support us through our fall fundraiser, which is October 24th this year, which is a banquet and a fun silent auction and an absolutely exhilarating live auction.
Kelly Dix, thank you so much for your time and energy and everything you do for the community here in Missoula.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Hello, my name is Kevin Niehaus, and I'm a teaching naturalist for the Montana Natural History Center, where our mission is to promote and cultivate the appreciation, understanding, and stewardship of nature through education. And for my naturalist tip of the week, I want to suggest taking a closer look at any aspen trees that you happen to pass on your next hike. Aspen trees are famous for their white bark and ability to scar, leaving behind evidence of past damage for decades to come. Often this nifty trait is abused by wayward couples and hikers trying to immortalize themselves by carving their initials into the trees, and while I certainly don't recommend doing that, I do recommend keeping your eyes out for any suspicious parallel scratches going up either side of the tree trunk. If you're lucky, you may just notice that the tree you're under has claw marks from where a black bear once climbed it. Black bears are expert tree climbers and often use aspen trees as a safe refuge when they feel threatened or need a good place for a nap. And the claw marks they leave behind can scar the bark and become a neat little reminder that you aren't the first animal to come this way. For more information or to become a member of the Montana Natural History Center, visit montananaturalist.org. That's montananaturalist.org.
My name is Jennifer Robinson, and I'm the Education Director for the Montana Natural History Center. And I'm here today to share with you about the Visiting Naturalist in the Schools program and the importance that this program has on so many students in our school community. Our mission at the Montana Natural History Center is to promote the appreciation, understanding, and stewardship of nature through education. And we do this through a variety of different kinds of programming. We have an exhibit, multiple exhibits actually, all throughout our center that showcase the different parts of Montana's natural history. We invite small children into our museum for free family kid programs. We do lots of evening lecture series, elements of distance learning programs, and then of course our capstone program, the Visiting Naturalist in the School. Our mission is to bring nature and connection to nature to everyone all around us in our communities. The Visiting Naturalist in the Schools program is one of the Montana Natural History Center's largest and most impactful programs in our community. In this program, we have a team of incredibly talented teaching naturalists that go into 4th and 5th grade classrooms all over the Missoula area, reaching into the lower Flathead Valley, up the Bitterroot, and more. During this time, we teach 4th and 5th grade students how to think and act like naturalists, scientists, writers, as they explore the outdoor areas in and around their classroom and in the natural areas in which they live. One of the really incredible things about the Visiting Naturalist in the Schools program is the mentorship aspect. The same teaching naturalist enters each 4th and 5th grade classroom once a month for an entire year. And every time they come into the classroom, they start with the same question. What have you noticed or observed since I was here last month? And every single month you see more and more hands going up as the students are excited to start to share the things that they notice, especially in the changes of the season. This is to help build confidence in our 4th and 5th grade students and their excitement about learning in the outdoors, their connection to nature, and starting to become closer to their understanding of science and natural practices outside.
My name is Lisa Bickle. I'm here to talk a little bit about the Visiting Naturalist in the Schools program. The Visiting Naturalist in the Schools program is a 4th grade, kind of an immersive education program where the Montana Natural History Center brings naturalists into classrooms pretty much throughout the whole school year. Most of us who have a passion or a desire to have an environmental mindset, we have those things in our lives. And Visiting Naturalists took those things and made sure that all of these kids in the schools were getting this. But like I said, they didn't just do this with these one-off field trips or these one-off classroom visits. Visiting Naturalist was making sure that 4th graders were getting these repeat visits and having, just a deeper opportunity to connect with a naturalist mentor. And this is happening over years. And so you work with the same teachers for year after year after year, demonstrating how to take kids outdoors and how to teach nature education in the classroom, how to teach math and science and language arts and all these core subjects with nature as a subject, or nature as your base. We've now started to see these really deep impacts. It's pretty amazing.
I am so honored and lucky to be part of the Montana Natural History Center team and the Visiting Naturalist in the Schools program. This is one of the most incredible nonprofit environmental education organization programs in partnerships with schools that I've had the pleasure of working with. Seeing the children's faces every month as they get so excited about their nature observations and seeing their naturalist really fills my heart with joy. I love hearing about the stories of when our students run into our naturalist around town or in other areas. Our teaching naturalists are almost like local celebrities at this point, and it's wonderful the kinds of relationships and connections that our team is able to make with students as they inspire them to be the next stewards for our planet.
That's it for this week's adventure, my friends in Missoula and around the world. But until next week, please remember, conservation is not a spectator sport. Living in Missoula is a privilege. With privilege comes responsibility. Please get educated and engaged. Speak up on behalf of wildlife and wild places. And if you think you're too small to make a difference, well then you've never spent the night with a mosquito.